Good evening. I'm going to go ahead and call the meeting to order at 6 o'clock on October 11th. This is a full board meeting of the Livingston County Board of Commissioners. As we start every meeting, we'll start off with a moment of silent reflection. Thank you. Now, if you would rise and join us in the Pledge of Allegiance. Are you going to start us off, Chip? I pledge of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. You did a very nice job. Roll call, please.
Commissioner Nakagiri,
Here.
Commissioner Smith,
Here.
Commissioner Reader, Commissioner Helserman,
Here.
Commissioner Dreck,
Here.
Commissioner Zajac, Commissioner Griffith is absent, Commissioner Gross,
Here.
and Commissioner Plank. Here. A quorum is present.
Thank you. Item number 5 is correspondence. This evening, we have 2 pieces of correspondence, one from Iron County, or actually both from Iron County. I'm looking for a motion to receive the correspondence and place on file.
Moved.
Motion by Commissioner Zajac, support by Commissioner Plank. Any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. The resolution passes. Item number 6 is employee recognition. This is our quarterly recognition for employees that excel above and beyond the call of duty. This evening, we have with us Patty Heilner from our Let's department, and it's always my honor and pleasure to read what some of the individuals had written when they nominated Patty. So if you would bear with me here. So I would like to nominate my coworker, Patty. Patty has worked for Let's for 18 years. She is one of our early morning drivers, which presents itself with challenges the rest of us don't regularly face. She is one of the first to encounter construction zones, confront rush hour traffic and harsh winter weather conditions before the roads have been plowed, and few bus drivers are available for assistance. She handles the stress with ease and additionally offers to help dispatch other drivers when she can. She is a safe and reliable driver who has compassion for all her passengers. As an example, a few months ago, she noticed a passenger was in distress and called 911. It turns out the passenger was having a heart attack, and Patty's call for help possibly saved her life. But this story is no surprise to anybody who knows Patty. She has a heart of gold. She is a knowledgeable, dependable person with a fun and witty personality. Her coworkers and passengers love her. She deserves to be recognized for her outstanding service to our community. And then there was one other nomination comments I wanted to share with everybody here. Patty is always aware of a rider's safety and well-being. On April 8th, a rider boarded Patty's bus and did not seem to be herself. She was anxious. After just a few minutes on the bus, Patty noticed the rider was more anxious and struggling to breathe. Patty pulled her bus to the side of the road and called 911. Patty reported her location and the situation to Let's Dispatch and kept them apprised of events. Ultimately, the rider was taken by Livingston County EMS to the hospital. Patty's awareness of her rider, her quick thinking and quick response were key to preventing a serious situation from becoming worse. A few days after this occurred, the rider called back to thank Let's and Patty specifically because she had been having a heart attack. That is an awesome story, and it is clear why she was nominated and why she won the award. So if you would join me in giving her a round of applause. Patty, if you wouldn't mind joining us up here, we have a plaque for you, and if you would like to get your picture with us, we would be honored to have you.
Click, click, click. Thank you.
Thank you.
One more. Congratulations. Oh, sorry. This one's for our hallway.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm not sure. Vacation package behind door number one, right?
Oh, you're welcome. Thank you very much for all that you do, Patty. Let's see here. Next on the agenda is call to the public. This is opportunity for citizens to share their thoughts and comments with the board. Everybody will have 3 minutes. I'll run a timer at about 2 minutes and 45 seconds. I'll quietly say you have 15 seconds and so that you have a little bit of heads up. And anyway, if you wanted to speak, you should have filled out a card. I see our clerk has at least one card.
Correct. Yvonne Black, Marion Township.
Hello, my name is Yvonne Black. I live in Marion Township. So I'm here this evening to speak to Resolution 153 to accept MDHHS funding to emergency threats. Okay, so this is almost identical to the resolution that unanimously failed in the Finance Committee back in August of 2021 after what's from 7:30 a.m. to I believe it was like 3 p.m. that meeting went because of all the public comment. That failed, and it went to Commissioner Zajak's motion or new resolution, then a bunch of motions, and finally the county ended up spending some money instead of taking the state funding. So Resolution 153 states in here that this is an agreement between the state health director and the Livingston County Board of Commissioners. So you're entering into basically a contract between the state and the county. So the Michigan Constitution, Article 4, Section 51 states that the legislature shall pass laws for the public health. So under the Public Health Code, the state director, Elizabeth Hertel, and local county health officers are constrained by completely separate sets of laws. And so according to the Michigan law, unless there's a statewide emergency of some kind, the state director has absolutely no authority whatsoever over the local public health area in Livingston County. This authority is legislated to the local health officer who is accountable to the county commissioner. So the state director is accountable to the governor, the local health officer is accountable to the county commissioners. They hire, they fire, they appoint. So therefore, the Livingston County Commissioners don't have the authority to act outside the legislature and grant the state director authority over the public health here in Livingston County. So taking this money and entering into this agreement is acting outside of the Constitution that the legislature makes laws. The legislature only gives the health director or the state health department authority in a statewide emergency. You can't just interject the state department into the local public health by taking money and there's no legality in this contract. You have to have it's an agreement, but it's still a contract. We have an agreement, consideration, capacity, and legality. The county commissioners can't act outside the law and allow
You have
the
15
state
seconds.
department to engage in public health activities, contact tracing, any of the stuff which doesn't even, under the resolution, it doesn't even specific 100 pages of all kinds of arbitrary government overreach. Thank you.
Thank you.
No
No
more
other cards. Look, I'm gonna look at Zoom and see if there's any hands raised. I do not, hold on, I just want to scroll down through. Do not see any hands raised, so I'm going to go ahead and close the call to the public and remind citizens that there's a second call to the public at the end of the meeting. That's 2 minutes in duration. Item number 8 is approval of minutes. We have 2 sets of minutes. We have meeting minutes dated September 26, 2022, and then minutes of a work session dated September 28, 2022. I'm looking for a motion to approve both sets of minutes.
So move Gross.
Support, Helserman.
Motion by Commissioner Gross, support by Commissioner Helserman. Any additions or corrections to the minutes? Seeing and hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Both minutes are passed. Item number 9 is tabled items from previous meetings. Resolution 2022-09-136 would look for a motion to remove from the table. If it's the will of the board.
So moves, Zajac. Second, Drick.
Motion by Commissioner Zajac, support by Commissioner Drick. Our Administrator Byrd wants to share some information.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman Nakagiri and members of the board. I want to thank you for your patience.
Oh, yes,
I'm
yeah, I
sorry.
guess.
That's a vote to take it off the table.
Yes.
Oh,
Any discussion on taking off the table? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign.
thank you. I want to thank you for your patience as we work through some issues over the last few weeks on the document. We also had some scheduling issues that we worked around. So last Friday, I sent the board an updated agreement electronically. I've also put a hard copy of that on your desk tonight. The hold harmless agreement that generated discussion and concern last month has been removed from the document. This revised draft has been approved both by our legal counsel and by our Realtor. There's still some information yet to be filled into the agreement. For example, we need to fill out the amendment page, the pricing, and just to reiterate what that was, we're looking for an asking price of $400,000 for both lots. If they're sold separately, it'd be $225,000 and $175,000. So prior to signing anything, I'll verify with the Realtor that that's still the suggested asking price. I believe that hasn't changed, but we'll fill that out, and we'll also include the tax ID numbers for those parcels on that page as well. The resolution in front of you that's been tabled is okay as is. It doesn't need to be amended. I just wanted to make sure that the agreement that's referenced in that resolution will attach to what you have now, not what was provided a month ago. So if approved, I'll keep the board updated on any relevant developments, any information that comes forward. And if we are able to sell these lots, that contract will come back to the board for discussion and review as well. So this hopefully isn't the final item that we'll be bringing forward on this topic tonight. But thank you again for your patience, and I will try to answer any questions if you have any.
Any questions? Nope. And I look for a motion to approve the resolution authorizing a listing agreement for the sale of 2 county-owned parcels on land on East Grand River Avenue.
So moved, Drick. Support, Zajac.
Motion by Commissioner Drick, support by Commissioner Zajac. Any further discussion or questions? In favor, signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. The resolution passes.
Thank you.
Item number 10 is approval of tonight's agenda. Is there a motion to approve tonight's agenda?
So move Gross.
Second, Reader.
Motion by Commissioner Gross, support by Commissioner Reader. Any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. We have an agenda. Item number 11 are reports, opportunity for commissioners to share information with their colleagues here. Commissioner Gross.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. At the end of June, first part of July, our former health officer, Diane McCormick, retired, and her position has been empty or vacant since then. And this board and committees have been struggling with the process of finding a replacement. And during the last 3 months, there's been a lot of what I would characterize as misinformation swirling about this position and the appointment of a replacement. And a week and a half or so ago, we received some information which I believe is very important and critical to try and set the record straight in terms of what we are dealing with. The misconception that I've referred to is that many people have spoken with respect to us finding a medical director. Very few people have spoken with regards to us finding a health officer. And there is a very big difference between the two. I have a letter that we have received, and I'm only going to read part of it, but I think it's very important, so bear with me for a moment. The letter comes to us from Dr. Juan Marquez, MD. He says, I would like to provide clarification regarding the separate roles of medical director and administrative public health officer. I am a board certified preventative medicine physician and serve as the medical director for both Washtenaw County Health Department and Livingston County Health Department. As defined in the Michigan Administrative Code, the medical director is responsible for developing and carrying out medical policies, procedures, and standing orders, and for advising the administrative health officer on matters related to medical specialty judgments. The separate role of administrative health officer and medical director is common in Michigan, with the majority of local health departments adopting this structure. As medical director, I work closely with health officers in both counties to provide medical advice when appropriate. This advice is taken into account when decisions and policies are developed by the health department under the direction of the administrative health officer. I think it's very important for everybody to understand that the position that is open is for an administrative health officer. And we are receiving resumes, and I think today was the last day, is that correct?
Yes.
Yesterday. So we have a number of resumes and applications that have been submitted, and our committees will work diligently to go through those with the hope of this board appointing an administrative health officer. We already have a medical director, and there's a big difference between the two. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Gross. Any other commissioners? Commissioner Zajac.
Thank you. Just a real brief report. I've talked to the board before about the work we've been doing with the schools. I actually see a couple students here. Pretty exciting opportunities with the clerk taking a lead role in that. Hopefully with the upcoming election, we'll have an opportunity soon to have kids at least the government classes at Howell participating in election activities. That may require a couple of dollars from this commission. And so I would hope when that time comes, if a couple of bucks are needed, that this commission would support such exposure to really the ground floor of elections and really where all the work is done by the clerk of the year in the state of Michigan. So if anybody should be supported, I think it should be our clerk as we go in and expose kids to these types of very fundamental opportunities related to our local government. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Zajac. Anybody else? I've got a couple of things I'd like to share. I wanted to let my colleagues know, I've asked the county administrator to approve out of contingency funds, of which there's about 74,000 total funds left, about $1,500 to $2,000 for some statistical software that I'll be using to work with EMS to assess, all of the data that for any run that EMS makes. There are we've got years and years of data. We've got in every run, we've got, how long the response time was, the day of the week, the type of call that was made. There's, I think, 20 or 25 different columns of data. So I've been chatting with Director Felposh about, finding a better way than Excel to analyze the data and see if it tells us anything. We may do an analysis and maybe we don't learn anything. I tend to doubt that. But anyway, I have a master's degree in statistics. I've done this many times in the past for my before I came on the board. So I'm looking forward to working with the director with a little bit more sophisticated software to see if we can optimize what we can do in terms of optimizing our response times. So I wanted to make my colleagues aware of that. Also, the State of the County address is coming up. That's November 1st. Look forward to everybody being participating. We have some exciting news to share with the public and look forward to the event. So thank you very much. Nothing further. We will move on to resolutions for consideration. The first one is 2022-10-152. It's a resolution to approve the annual 2022 apportionment report. Is there a motion?
So move, Helserman.
Support, Plank.
Motion by Commissioner Helserman, support by Commissioner Plank. Yes.
Okay, these are all the millage rates, special assessments, the drain assessments to be levied this year for the, throughout the county. And it comes to you every year. This year, however, we have 3 issues that are on the ballot in November. November 8th is a late election, and by the time it's certified, I'm going to be coming to you on December 14th. And based on the contingency that it's certified, so we can have it ready, because it takes the townships 2 weeks to get this stuff printed. So we're really in a time crunch. Takes us about 5 hours each unit to get them in balance. So we had 18 units after the 14th to get through our process before we can get them. So it's going to be a real tight squeeze, but just a heads up, you won't get the information until probably the 10th. That's the Thursday before the meeting. The meeting's on the 14th. That's the best I can do with it all.
The 10th of December.
Yes. No, November.
November.
The election was on the 8th. I'll have it ready to you on the 10th and the board meeting on the 14th.
Other questions from commissioners? I have one question. So the townships take about 2 weeks to get the tax bills set up.
They send them to printers and the printers give them a time slot to do it. I've let them all know that, we have the veterans, we have Fowlerville Library, we have Whitmore Lake Schools. So we've got different areas that if this is, if you're part of any of this, you're going to have to wait till the 14th. And that's everybody. So we're kind of really between a rock and a hard place on that one. So.
Okay, and winter tax bills are supposed to be sent out on the 1st of December?
They're due and payable December 1st. They're a lien against the property December 1st.
Okay. Any other questions? Roll call vote.
Commissioner Helserman,
Yes.
Commissioner Dreck,
Yes.
Commissioner Zajac.
Yes.
Commissioner Griffith is absent. Commissioner Gross,
Yes.
Commissioner Plank,
Yes.
Commissioner Smith,
Yes.
Commissioner Reader,
Yes.
and Commissioner Nakagiri.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Resolution 2022-10-153. It's a resolution to accept the Michigan Department of Health and Human Services funding to support Livingston County Health Department's response to emerging threats. Is there a motion?
Move. Plank.
Support.
Motion by Commissioner. Motion by Commissioner Plank, support by Commissioner Zajac. We have our Matt Bowling, if.
Good evening, Commissioners. I presented this at committee last week. I don't know how much detail you want me to go into. You should have a revised resolution that Nathan had sent out to you all. As I mentioned at the committee meeting, the state notified us, actually the day of the meeting last week, that we had a reduction in funding on the immunization portion of the contract from $900,000 to $116,000. So you should see a new amount reflected there, $894,000 and some change. This contract supports some ongoing, COVID activities in the department, primarily immunizations. $116,000 really covers more or less one staff person, our nursing coordinator that handles immunizations in our department for really all immunizations, not just COVID. The workforce development, I think, is self-explanatory. It helps build our public health workforce in the department, not just specific to COVID, but in all public health programs. And the EpiLab capacity, and it has a lot of other names. That one is also flexible to help us do outreach and work within congregate care settings to help with communicable disease outbreaks, COVID and other communicable diseases. So it is really flexible funding. I mean, this started, because of COVID and the pandemic, but it's really morphed into support for local health departments to continue kind of the good work that we're doing with the, the bonds we've made with our congregate care settings and so forth. So I am happy to answer any questions you might have.
Motion to amend to change the $900,000 number to the 116,251.
So we have a motion by Commissioner Zajac to amend the and support by Commissioner Helserman. Any discussion on the amendment? All those in favor of approving the amendment signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. So now we have an amended motion. Is there any questions for Mr. Bolang on the amended motion? Commissioner Drick.
Thank you. Did you receive any other paperwork that would help us understand what projects will not be funded? With the 917,000, there were a number of specific projects. Now with the 116, I'm hearing it might just be a staffer, and all the projects relative to COVID are out the window. Or didn't they tell you?
I mean, it's really up to each local health department to determine how that funding, there's parameters for each of the pots of money, but we'll have to make some decisions internally going forward with the reduced funding from this contract. So
I'm specifically in the package of over 100 pages. There's a project called ARPA for COVID. There's a project called for COVID immunizations.
right,
There's
it's three.
COVID workforce. There's COVID mobile testing. I'm guessing
It's only the
all
three.
those are gone.
Well, they never existed for us anyway. We were only involved in the three programs: the immunizations, the workforce development, and the EpiLab capacity. Those are the three pots of money we received. This is a blanket contract for the state of Michigan. So there's some health departments that do more programs than we do here locally. So that's all we've ever been involved
It
with.
seemed as though it was specific for us because it came to Livingston County. So you're saying
The contract is, but it's sort of it's a shell of a contract that includes all the programs in the state of Michigan for all the 45 local health departments. So if you look at one of
if
the,
somebody looks at the record, they'll see that we voted for the entire contract with all these projects.
yeah, I should have the page marked, but there is a page specific to what our funding is on one of the attachments. I don't have it handy here. That talks about the funding specific to local or Livingston County Health Department. I agree, it can be a little
I missed that
confusing.
Page, I guess.
Yeah, it's in there on what funding we're receiving from the state for the response to this emerging threats contract. So that's where the detail is for Livingston County Health Department. The rest of it is sort of boilerplate that the rest of the 45 health departments get.
So it's your representation that the 116 will just be staff.
Well, that's about all it can afford, between salary and fringes, it pretty much is a staff person. A lot of this is staff, honestly, all of this funding, this $900,000, it's staff time. We can buy things with it. We can buy IT equipment, we can buy some office sorts of things. We've done a lot of good things with this money as far as just bolstering our department.
Is the ELC portion of the 606 hasn't changed, correct?
Right.
And am I correct in reading that that is for contact tracing and case investigation in schools, and it's to promote vaccination?
Yeah, I mean, that's part of it. Yeah.
Okay.
Our activities within the schools has really changed over the last year. I don't know if you want me to go into any detail, but I mean,
I'm wondering why we need to promote vaccination in schools anymore.
I think it's promoting vaccinations generally. People know about, I mean, at this point, how much are we really doing? It's not like it was before when we were the only ones that had the vaccine. I mean, now the vaccine's really available. There's not much direct promoting within schools. I'll say we're not doing everything, every word that's written in here. We're not doing it per word of the attachments. With the EPI lab capacity, we're also used to do some cross training and other communicable diseases, including sexually transmitted diseases, hepatitis, foodborne outbreak investigations, TB, which we've used some money on the TB investigations from some of our refugees that have been here, and other healthcare associated diseases. I mean, all that's in there. It's all kind of wrapped into one.
PFAS, all that.
Yeah, and that could be, that's not in this contract. But this is flexible enough that we do, and I mentioned the other night, that if we get something emerging, something new that we didn't know was coming, this is a flexible funding mechanism for local health departments then to respond to that.
Okay, so none of the paperwork from the state so far has come down and said, ignore the specific immunization projects that are listed, right?
Right.
Okay. And the contract doesn't have any specific time emergency deadline because it says the contract starts at the later of when it's signed or October 1st, right? We're not under a pressure
The
gun.
state's rather unhappy with us right now that this has not been executed yet. I wanted to wait until we had full language within these contracts because last year we didn't, and we ended up where we ended up. So I purposely waited. I told the state, this is our kind of our board meeting process. This is kind of the latest date we might have an answer. So really, the way I'd like to see this going forward with this contract, as well as the next resolution I'll be presenting. We generally have an idea of our funding during the summertime, usually in July, just for budgeting purposes. I think in the past, we've come to the board in July or August saying, hey, this is what we're getting. When we get the final contract language, legal will review it. Are you okay for us to sign it once that happens? And that's the process we should be following going forward. Right now, where we're past, the state's fiscal year has already started. I think we're the only health department that hasn't signed this contract yet. So yeah, we kind of are under the gun to get this executed.
How will it work where you take the contract that was attached to our packet? And then who will change the numbers to send it back to the state? Will the state send us another package or
It's an
will you
amendment.
guys send it?
Yeah, it's an electronic contract system the state has. It's called egrams. They'll amend our contract within there. We have to kind of approve the first one that has the original amount. They'll send an amendment probably the next day. And then we'll execute that one, should this be approved. So that's how it works. If there's any program functional changes, then this resolution says I come back before you folks and ask for permission to go forward. If it's just a matter of moving some numbers around, then I would have permission to sign that.
Okay.
Commissioner Drake, you have further questions?
Yes. I need to get your take on this. There's a clause in the contract that requires the health department employees to report, would be a good word, snitch would be a bad word, but you have to tell the state if your governing body, us 9, tries to change the contract. Do you think that's good for our county? Seems a little odd that the state would need to recruit folks in your department to report to them.
I'm sure there's some federal requirements and other things within the contract that they'd like to know if it gets changed, if we're still, again, I don't know how to answer your question directly.
It's a concern because I read it.
Yeah,
Okay. There's another contract that says, or there's another contract clause that says, if the contract's terminated, the state can use the leftover money to hire others to fulfill the contract. Does that sound like something good for the county if we decide we don't want to do this, that they can still get it done?
I mean, my preference would be that the board approves this funding and we do the work here locally. Then we wouldn't
get
have to do
that.
that.
But if it gets terminated it sounds like the state can come in and do it anyway.
You know, if we're 2 years ago during the middle of a pandemic and we weren't doing our jobs, or the contract was terminated, then I would see some purpose for that. I don't see that today. Our response is not the level right now that it was 2 years ago.
Are you aware of the contract clause that says if the contract is terminated, the entire contract survives the termination? Do you think that's a bit of a risk for Livingston County to say, okay, but then if we don't like it and we exercise our rights to terminate, we're not terminating. We can't terminate it.
So Commissioner Drick, I'm not a contract attorney. We have corporate counsel that I've already passed this through and they've reviewed it. So I mean, asking my opinion about clauses of the contract, I mean, I can, again, I'd like to do this work locally and I think we can do an effective job with our population.
You're correct. We have attorneys that should be looking at this. In my opinion, there are specific powers that are granted to counties under the state statute. And we do not have the power to pass a resolution that goes outside of our powers. And this contract in many places delegates, I think, wrongly, the power or the authority to let the health department and the state of Michigan require us to obey rules, regulations, policies, procedures, guidelines, manuals, and requirements, even opinions of the Department of Technology Management and Budget on the federal level. And when I read 4611, the statute that gives us the powers to act as a county, nowhere does it have any of those words, especially the word delegate, our duty to manage things to the federal government that then the health department has to obey. In my humble opinion, I think we need some time to have the contract language comport with the representations that the COVID projects are probably out. We don't need a contract floating around with 6 COVID projects that are probably out because 917 went down to 116. We should have a complete and full contract in front of us. I think our attorneys ought to decide and tell us whether they think it's beneficial to the county to have 3 clauses in the contract that are pretty risky or rough on us at the county. And whether MCLA 46.11 specifically gives us the power to delegate from unelected federal bureaucrats to the health department. I've read it a couple of times. I don't find the word delegate or federal or any of that in our empowering clause, in our empowering statute. I'm ecstatic that there are a lot less money for immunizations from 917 down to 116. I'm ecstatic you're saying that 116 is just for staff, but the rest of it, we should take a pause and give the attorney 30 or so days to address some of these risks, some of these poison pill clauses that hurt. He's got to look at books. He's got to come up with a written opinion. He's got to look for case law. That would be my suggestion. And you understand none of the questions I ask you are personal. It's all contract.
I didn't take them personal.
It's
no.
all contract law that I'm looking at. Okay. Thank you.
Commissioner Helserman?
I have Couple questions. First, to Commissioner Direct. Can we put in a clause into this that we do not give up any of our legal rights that are specified in law? Would that be a fix without changing all this other language? That's my first question. I don't know whether I have others, but.
The amendment procedure requires us to put it in writing to the state Department of Health. They then have 30 days to respond. Whether they respond positively or negatively, it's up to them.
Okay.
So that would be, there's a chance, but not something that would be resolved tonight.
Because last time we did some specifying of this money, what it could be used for, what it couldn't be used for. And that was apparently acceptable because it went forward. If my understanding is correct, we have by our resolutions last year, put a lot of conditions on the spending of this money, and the state did not object. They gave us the money with those stipulations. That's my understanding. So then that's my question to you. Then my question to you, and maybe to legal counsel, is this a contract different than others? In the call of the public, there was it was brought to our attention that it was the opinion of Ms. Black that this was different. This was from the state to us. We have our regular funding, broad funding, and I don't understand if there's a difference between our broad funding and our relationship to the state and this funding. And maybe Rich McNulty might have that answer. If you don't, I think that you might not be able to answer that question. So that would be a question I would direct to Rick, Rich McNulty, if you could talk a little bit about that. Is that is that a concern for us?
I'm not totally sure that I'm understanding your question, but the fact is that this contract is the form contract that the state puts out. We've accepted it for other counties, and we have no basis, at least at this time, that we wouldn't be accepting it as to form for your county. The provisions, some of the provisions that were questioned before are standard pass-through provisions, which have been upheld by both the U.S. Supreme Court in terms of the grant of funding. And the rule is just quite now. This is also similar. Now there's different programs, but there's similar provisions that are placed on what you call the general funding. Each of the fundings come with contracts and stipulations similar to this one, both through the state and pass through from the state or from the federal through the state to you through the health department.
So you see no significant difference between this and other, like the next contract that we have entered into for many years at the county.
Yeah, to the extent that it's a federal pass through or it's a straight direct county pass through, they have contracting rules that require that you basically follow the rules of the grant. Just like you do for other grants, and these are the rules of the grant, which are pretty standard. The rule regarding reporting, that's also a statutory provision in the statute. that applies to other things, which really the state puts in place in order to make sure that if the entity doesn't do it, they're notified, because by law, you have to be a compliant agency to receive the funding. And if you're not compliant, then the state has different avenues to provide those services elsewhere. Or through other means. I shouldn't say elsewhere, through other means. Did I answer?
Yes, yeah, I just know that last year that this money was spent to my knowledge in an agreeable way with the state and with this board and with the health department. I think there was a good cooperation and a good understanding, and there wasn't anything from this particular contract that caused any special problems from the contract itself. Thank you. That's all I have.
Commissioner Plank.
So I'm kind of perplexed why we're going so deep into this. I feel like it's deja vu again, sort of from as we keep talking about the past, back in general government, back in September, this came before that committee to accept state funding for COVID. And it passed, and it went to the finance meeting. And then it, I believe it was rejected during the finance meeting. And then there was, it was brought up again in a board meeting at the end of September. It was a resolution authorizing funding of a COVID-19 mitigation plan specifically tailored for Livingston County, which we gave $500,000 a quarter from our ARPA funds. So we did not take the grant funding at that time. Then, and by the way, that passed too. So then fast forward to March 14th of 2022, a resolution was introduced. It was 2022-03040. And it was a resolution adopting our Livingston County Vision Tour for the strategic use of ARPA funding. It was well done. It was sort of a roadmap on how we were going to spend that money. But it didn't list specific projects that we were going to spend the money on. And there was in the resolution, it said, be it further resolved paragraph, that administration, the appropriate department head and the board chair shall execute all necessary paperwork to effectuate this resolution, including actions necessary to enable continued reallocation of spending that is eligible for ARPA account spending, authorized by resolution, referring back to that resolution that we put sort of restrictions on, that is eligible for reimbursement from resources outside of Livingston County, which to me means grant funding, where such authorized spending shall remain subject to the controls of the resolution to 2021-09-156. So in summary, we rejected it, but we then approved it, but we wanted to use ARPA funding instead of the state grant funding. But then through the Vision Tour resolution, we gave authorization to our department heads, our administration, and our county chair to go ahead and use outside funding, which, by the way, we never used ARPA funding for any of the COVID stuff. It came back into the ARPA funds, and we ended up accepting that grant. So I'm kind of shocked that we're actually having these in-depth discussions about this grant funding when we've already accepted this in the past. We all agreed to it. By the way, it passed 9-0. So hopefully I got my facts straight. I mean, anybody can, chime in on that. But for me, I'm supporting both of these resolutions because we already supported it in the past. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Commissioner Smith?
Yeah, I'm just glad that it's flexible enough because things are changing out there. We have a new polio case in New York, and something that's very important to me, that should that happen here, God forbid, you'd be able to use the funding resources to do whatever we could to tackle that and nip that in the bud.
Anybody else?
Second time.
Commissioner, yeah, Commissioner Drick.
Until we know what projects are taken out of the contract, that's orally been told us that it's reduced, we shouldn't be voting on anything. Because we have a set of contracts that tells us all the things that they'll do with the money. And we don't know now what has been taken out or what they will do or won't do. I'm not suggesting today to vote against it. I'm suggesting that we get the full contract to read so we know what's in and what's out. So I'm looking for an adjournment.
An adjournment?
If the amount of money goes from 16 down to 8, something's got to be taken out that they're not going to do. And all we have is the full contract of what they're going to do with the 1.6. We don't know what they're going to do with the 800,000, because some of the projects have to be deleted. So I'm not comfortable voting on a contract that maybe sometime in the future we'll learn what's been deleted. We know the number's different, but we don't know what projects are taken out.
Are you set, Commissioner Drick?
Yes.
Commissioner Gross?
Question for Mr. Bowling. Did I understand you correctly earlier that the normal process would be that we would approve this grant as it stands, the information regarding the approval would go back to the State Department of Health, and then in turn, they would send us a revised contract? Is that what you were alluding to earlier?
Well, I don't know which part you're alluding to, but you know, it had to be, I guess, normal practice for, and I'm talking more probably about our comprehensive resolution that follows this one. Normal practice is, here's your allocation for this coming fiscal year. We wouldn't have the full contract in place to execute yet, but we'd have those numbers. We come before the board with a resolution saying, here are the numbers for all those programs. As long as legal approves it, the board would say, okay, sounds good to us. And then we'd be able to execute it. We usually get that final contract in September, early September. You know, the timing wasn't right for this to have a full contract executed for, we didn't get the numbers until about the second week in September. And because of the board meetings, this is kind of where we are the first time we could come before you. So yeah, I mean, we would execute what's sitting now, and maybe this is too much detail, you know, within our electronic grants program within the state is the original resolution amount, which will immediately be amended once you hit go. We've already got an email from the state saying it's already been amended to that. I have the letter from the state saying that number is not right. This is the new number, but just the way their program works, we won't get that until we hit the first contract. It's just an electronic signature. The amended one would come and then that one would be executed. And quite honestly, that can change throughout the year depending on different funding sources and different emerging threats that might be out there. You know, there could be more money coming in. Generally, there aren't cuts after this. I think the state's conservative about not cutting beyond where we are at this point in the year, but there could be additional.
But the original contract, if you will, that we've all been provided with 200 pages roughly. Will the state send us a brand new version of that?
There's no different version of that contract. That is the contract. The only difference would be on one of the end pages of the contract. I'm sorry, I don't have 500 pages of paper in front of me, but there is some detail on what Livingston County is funded for. And it's the 3 pots of money that I detailed in my memo. You know, it's the epi lab capacity, it's the immunizations and workforce development. It's just a matter of the funding for immunizations was reduced. Everything else stays the same.
But at some point, are we going to have a document, 1 page, perhaps several, that totaled up, that showed the various programs that totaled up to 917,000. And then we'll have another one that shows only those programs or whatever makes up the 116,000. Are we going to have documentation that shows the difference?
So it's not different programs, it's sort of the scale of the response. You know, even if we were awarded $900,000, we wouldn't have that scale of response. That was just a placeholder number the state had in the contract. Our response, you know, we budgeted, I think we budgeted like $350,000. Not, we knew we weren't going to get the full funding amount when I came before the board, but that's the only number we had to work with. That did get reduced and we'll work with that number, but that, you know, that is what the contract will be going forward. So I guess I would have an executed document, you know, from the state's electronic system once it's done. You know, any commissioner that want a copy of that, you're more than welcome to it. But the programs themselves don't change. It's just the funding amount that changes. If that answers your question.
Well, it answers the question. I'm not sure I'm entirely happy with it. I would rather see that, but if that's not possible, I guess I trust your judgment that we would do what we need to do with whatever resources we have.
And again, the resolution binds us to that former resolution that Commissioner Plank referred to. So I mean, we're not going outside the scope of what's already in that resolution.
So thank you.
Anybody else? I have one question. We have an array of things that are listed, allowable uses in the contract. It used to be $917,000. Now it's $116,000. So when you said it's scale, it's this, I think you used the word scale. So I just want to make sure I understand. So if we had 10 things we could do, you know, if the contract said you can do these 10 things and spend $917,000 with now that the amount's down to $116,000, it's still those, by contract, it's still those 10 things. It's just the amount that you can spend is $116,000.
Right, and the effort into
correct?
them. So I mean, honestly, the reduction reduces the immunization part of that contract to really personnel costs, you know, just to run our immunization clinics.
Okay. Thank you. Anything else? We have a motion and support. This requires a roll call.
Commissioner Plank,
Yes.
Commissioner Smith,
Yes.
Commissioner Reader,
Yes.
Commissioner Nakagiri.
Yes.
Commissioner Helserman,
Yes.
Commissioner Dreck,
No.
Commissioner Zajac.
Yes.
Commissioner Griffith is absent and Commissioner Gross.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Next one is 2022-10-154. It's a resolution to authorize an agreement for the delivery of comprehensive health services for the period October 1st, 2022 through September 30th, 2023. Is there a motion?
Support.
Motion by Commissioner Plank, support by Commissioner Smith.
Again, I presented this at committee meeting. I mean, if there's more questions, this is our standard contract. We come before the board every year. It covers our mandated services at the health department. This list should not look unfamiliar to you. These are the normal things we do day in and day out. And this is the state's reimbursement cost for that. We do charge some fees to cover costs 100%, but you know, that this gets us through the lion's share of those activities. So I would entertain any questions if there are any.
Questions from commissioners? This requires a roll call vote.
Commissioner Plank,
Yes.
Commissioner Smith,
Yes.
Commissioner Reader,
Yes.
Commissioner Nakagiri.
Yes.
Commissioner Helserman,
Yes.
Commissioner Dreck,
Yes.
Commissioner Zajac.
Yes.
Commissioner Griffith is absent and Commissioner Gross.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you, commissioners.
Next one is 2022-10-155. It's a resolution urging the Michigan legislature to amend the No-Fault Insurance Reform Act. Is there a motion?
So moved, Reader.
Support, Helserman.
Motion by Commissioner Reader, support by Commissioner Helserman. This was discussed in committee. Are there any follow-up questions, comments? Commissioner Zajac.
Thank you, Commissioner Nakagiri. I just want to point out my a deep concern with this board passing such a resolution. It's well outside the scope of the Board of Commissioners, and I find it inappropriate to opine on this issue. The other related fact is this is extremely complicated. It is, as an example, there's information that's been posted about the impact to premium costs to individuals that could result from even a slight change and that have even resulted from slight changes. And also point out that this has taken decades of hard work, I would say, to amend no fault and to achieve a no fault reform. And if this board is going to opine on something that is this complicated, that we frankly haven't been charged with investigating and reading the hundreds of pages of legislation, I think we are doing the taxpayers of our county, our constituents, an extreme disservice. So I'm not offering an opinion one way or another on the no fault reform, but I think it's well outside the scope of what we should be considering opining on. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Commissioner Smith.
At the risk of sounding like a repetitive person, I agree wholeheartedly. This is well out of our scope. It is such a complicated matter. I have tried to look into this, and I'm just a simple country banker, and it sure boggles my mind. And I just think that the fact that they're asking me to vote on this, I couldn't vote on this. I don't have the knowledge of the subject matter. I think it's unfortunate that there are people that are apparently losing benefits, and I think that it's also unfortunate that those people don't seem to be taking advantage of the appellate, not the appellate, but the money that's been set aside for those that have been impacted so severely. So I'm just beyond myself with lack of knowledge on this, and I thought it was hard enough to read 500 some pages on the health department budget, but that's nothing compared to this matter. So I would encourage us not to move forward on this.
Commissioner Gross.
Yeah, I have to agree with Commissioner Zajac and Commissioner Smith. This issue came up probably in July. We had some folks come in and address us during call to the public on this issue. And I did some research, and what I found was that was a number of 18,000 people who were affected by this change. And as Commissioner Smith has indicated, there is a process in place with the legislation whereby those 18,000 people can apply for assistance over and above what has been dictated. And I believe as of the middle of July, which I recognize as, a couple of months ago, that only 123 people had submitted requests for assistance. I don't know if it's a lack of education, if the word hasn't been spread properly to the persons affected by that change to the insurance coverage, but that's like 1%, and somebody other than us needs to step up the education process. Thank you.
Commissioner Reader.
I agree with my colleagues. I think this is a legislation issue. It shouldn't be before the board. We've had several counties submit similar resolutions that they passed. And we had Representative Bazat here, which I think is his job to do, not ours. But I'm glad to support it for discussion, but I agree. It's very difficult for us to sit back and see that people are suffering because of what the legislation did, but they're the ones that have to correct it. And I think that we're all behind the fact that we want those things to be remedied, but it's not for us to say. It's outside of our wheelhouse. Thank you.
Anybody else? Commissioner Helserman.
I don't know, in a resolution this short, you can't say everything. I have spoken in general about the futility of these sorts of resolutions. But I think just the fact, I'll vote favorably for this. I think the legislature needs to know that there are people concerned, that we're concerned that they take this up again. And so, it's, I think that, my understanding is that they had worked out something that would have been different than this, and in the very last minute, somebody recharacterized the whole thing, and the whole legislature, to their shame, did not catch it. And they allowed the bad changes to come in. I think I'll vote favorably for it, even though I think that I generally think that they don't accomplish very much, put it that way, so.
Commissioner Reader.
I think the proper way is for you to send a letter to your representatives that are dealing with this issue to voice what your opinion is on supporting it or not, and be more specific about what you agree to should be changed. But for the whole board to stand behind one resolution that is generalized, I don't think it does much good. Thank you.
I'm gonna chime in on the discussion. Yeah, I concur with the sentiment that I don't feel qualified to opine in this on this question, much like Commissioner Smith had indicated. I have the same feelings or point of view. I can remember reading about all of the many counties that were opining on this issue, and wondering how they found the time in to drilling into doing the homework. But that doesn't mean that I'm unconcerned, with the plight of persons that have been negatively impacted. But I do think it's the role of the legislature to fix the issues that they created. So anyway, if there was interest on the board, I'd make the suggestion that to make a motion to postpone indefinitely this resolution.
So moved, Alderman.
Is there support? I'll support. Any discussion on postponing a vote on this resolution indefinitely? Seeing none, all those in favor of the indefinite postponement signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign.
Aye.
I think
Can I clarify that we had 3 yeses, Commissioner Helserman, Commissioner Nakagiri, and Commissioner Gross?
Anybody else? Correct.
Are you an aye or a
I
no?
was still contemplating the effect, and I have to admit, I wasn't quick on the draw.
Okay,
My sense is that I would go along with an indefinite postponement.
so are you
Yes.
a yes? So that's 4. And we have 4 noes.
So if
Motion fails.
the motion to postpone fails. Any further discussion on the resolution itself?
I personally think it's worse to vote no on this than to postpone. But that's my theory. But it's only my opinion.
All those in favor of the resolution signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same
Aye.
sign?
Aye.
Resolution fails. Next one is 2022-10-156. It's a resolution authorizing a third quarter budget amendment to the 2022 budget. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Support.
Motion by Commissioner Zajac, support by Commissioner Plank.
Good evening, everybody.
Good evening.
I'm bringing to you the third quarter budget amendment for 2022. And I just want to say off the bat, if I say 2023 at any time, I mean 2022, but we're right in the middle of budget season. So this is the third quarter amendment. As you know, this is part of the budget process. So we approve the budget, we monitor it every quarter, we come back to the board every time we need an amendment. So I will go over just a little bit of what is in the amendment. We've got actually quite a bit here. So starting with general fund, going over with the courts are actually requesting a reduction in court revenue in the amount of $52,544. But this is being offset by a reduction in expenses. They are actually reducing the general fund allocation to the child care fund in the amount of $245,000. And then the sheriff's department is increasing expenses by approximately $67,507. This includes $47,507 in the field services side for uniforms and equipment, $17,000 on the jail side for inmate meals, and $2,000 for court security uniforms. This is also being offset by an increase in revenue of approximately $118,507 for police and contracts on the field services side, and $91,000 increase in U.S. Marshal revenue on the jail side. So a total increase of revenue of $209,507. Also included is a 2021 capital project that is in the current year budget, but it actually started at the end of 2021. It's been in both 2021 and 2022. So 50% of it was completed last year and the remaining 50% is in this year. As you know, for capital projects, we're now recording those in our capital replacement fund. But since the first part of this was recorded in the general fund, we are going to request a transfer from capital into the general fund. And the budget amendment also authorizes the treasurer to transfer those funds from capital to general fund. Motor pool. Prosecutor. There's also an increase in revenue for the prosecutor's office of $41,245. This is in relation to actual work from 2021. The attorney that works for the family support was actually working for the prosecutor's office. So this is just reimbursing the general fund for that appropriation that we typically give family support. So again, $41,245. For motor pool, we have an increase of expense of approximately $254,000. And that is most of that is related to upfitting costs that were performed on the sheriff's vehicles. There's also an upfitting cost, I believe, for medical examiner investigators for 2021. We just received the invoice for that now. Greg from Motor Pool did let me know that that wasn't the 2021 budget. It just was not utilized because we received the invoice this year. For facilities, costs are going up. Our utilities costs have increased by $145,000. That is to all the various departments. So we actually did reach out to a lot of the departments and we were able to do budget transfers from one line item to the other. So this is just the balance of what is remaining. Also, I wanted to note that the water in the jail has significantly increased too. So that is included in this. For fiscal services, I had to put this in here. We reduced our contract with CoPro by approximately $4,000 for the remainder of the year. And we are recognizing revenue that we have received for the P card and the supply rebates in the amount of $15,400. For the drain, it's an increase in revenue of soil erosion permits of $50,000. Oh, I did want to also mention that I think that the $15,400 for fiscal services is showing up in the drain, but it's just in the wrong column. So it is in there.
I lost you on that one.
So for the $15,400 for the P card rebate for fiscal services, it's actually showing up in the drain column. So it's in the wrong column in the right under the right department. And then insurance premiums. So our MMRMA insurance premium has actually gone up. So there's an increase of about $210,000. That is related to the increase in the number of vehicles that we have with the sheriff's department. We also have an increase because of the additional ambulances that we have acquired. But that is offset by a distribution that we received of $239,000. The distribution from MMRMA, I believe it says workers' comp on there. That is incorrect. It's actually the distribution from MMRMA. We had $100,000 in the budget. We actually received $339,000. So this is just for the difference to recognize that. And then finally, we have the Vision Tour transfer that Commissioner Zajac has been asking about. So we are transferring $1.7 million from general fund departments to the Vision Tour contingency line item. And that is for the pre-pandemic level staffing and for COVID. So that is a net zero transfer, because it's just reducing the expenses that have been recorded over in ARPA. So overall for the general fund, this is an increase in both revenue and expenses of $526,440. So currently you will see that the expenditure budget is approximately $839,000 higher than the revenue. That is related specifically to the 2021 Vision Tour contingency that we brought in. So right now, the overall contingency for Vision Tour after this budget amendment will be $2.5 million. That's that very last line item on the first page of the general fund. And so that would leave us with a general fund expenditure budget of $55,280,809. Any questions on the general fund? Yes, yes, sir.
One attachment, not really titled, but I assume the first one, page 649 of the agenda, that I'm assuming is the general fund, because the second one is identified as special revenue funds. Is that correct?
Yes.
So the items that you referred to earlier, for example, the increase in for the sheriff for uniforms, et cetera, court security uniforms, you mentioned the prosecutor, the drain, fiscal services, all of those are part of that one line item on page 648, where it shows the general fund going from 54.7 up to 55.280 there.
Yes, so thank you, Commissioner. What's included in the packet is a summary, so it just shows the net total of all of the amendments. I left on your chair the detail that shows all of the individual lines that are included in that rolled up number.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome. Going over to the special revenue funds, I won't go into as great of detail for the special revenue funds, but again, the courts actually reduced the expenses in the child care fund by $692,000. They also made some adjustments between the juvenile piece and the DHS side, but the net effect is a decrease of $692,000. Veteran Services is requesting an increase of $75,000 for supportive services. The clerk is requesting an increase of $19,410 for the CPL for wages. And ARPA, again, we're recognizing those expenses, a budget for those expenditures for pre-pandemic level staffing and COVID. So that's $1.57 million for pre-pandemic level staffing and $127,000 for COVID. So the COVID expenses are through June. The pre-pandemic level staffing is through September. Also, we're requesting an increase in the transfer in or the allocation of general fund to the friend of the court. So the friend of the court, the last few years, we have actually reduced the general fund allocation, but we're at a point where we need to bump it back up to where it was. So the offset of the decrease from the allocation for child care fund, $100,000 of that is actually getting grabbed and being reallocated to the friend of the court. And then finally, motor pool, there is an increase of $446,994. And this is for fuel for the second quarter. So this actually came to the board, but it went into all of the individual departments' budgets. It did not go into the motor pool budget, and it really needs to be in both. So this is really more of a housekeeping issue that we didn't cover last quarter.
So this is just for the third quarter?
This for motor pool?
Yes.
This actually was something that came to the board last quarter. Yeah, so this is just to recognize it in motor pool. So what happens, expenditures happen in motor pool and then he charges back the departments. The department budget was modified, but the motor pool budget was not. And I believe that is all I have. The other expenditures are pretty minor and they just really reflect actual expenditure activity. So if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer those.
Questions from commissioners? Commissioner Drake.
Thank you. The last be it resolved talks about a parking lot project. What project do I get to mark off the big list I have for that?
That is the capital improvement project. It's the fence around the sheriff's security building. Yes. So that is the one that 50% of it was in 2021 and the other remaining 50% will be in this current year. That's the transfer from capital to the sheriff's department budget.
Thank you.
Commissioner Zajac.
Thank you, Commissioner Nakagiri. Just two comments on this. One, I think I mentioned this in the last board meeting that normally the process is this would come to FAM, but because of our new structure of scheduling, Commissioner Nakagiri and I discussed that the importance of getting it approved in October, skipping FAM and then coming right to this board meeting. And then the second item is I just want to highlight again the vision tour contingency, a very strategic move that this board did in my view, because what that $2.5 million represents is unrestricted funds now that through the FAM committee, the Board of Commissioners can allocate to projects that may be on the ARPA request list that otherwise do not satisfy ARPA requirements. We have our $10 million in unrestricted revenue loss line item, which still has its own boundaries within which you can play. But this $2.5 million is in the general fund contingency through the vision tour contingency that this board can apply as it deem necessary. So I've not heard of others that have done these types of things. I think this is a really unique and a really good move by this Board of Commissioners. And my expectation for that, though I won't be around to see it, is that it will climb to a very large number in the $7 to $9 million range over the course of time, just as we project today. And that number may even grow further based on the types of things we apply this to within our operations. So I know patting ourselves on the back, but it's a job well done, I think, on this move that we made with the vision tour contingency. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Commissioner Nakagiri?
Yes.
Can I thank you for bringing the contingency up. I did forget to mention that just for our regular contingency, normal contingency, as Nathan likes to call it, the number is now $209,896. And the reason for that is, I know you mentioned that we had $74,000 in contingency. Just to remind you that the board did authorize that the clerk's project would get paid for from ARPA. So what we have done is we have reversed that $60,000 that was approved in ARPA. And so that accounts for a portion of it. And then usually the contingency is where we balance out the account. So this actual amendment is increasing contingency by $75,000. So just, I forgot to mention that, but thank you.
I got a question.
Sure.
Here. So on referring to this sheet here
Yes.
with the expenses. So expenses have gone up $526,440. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Where does that money come from?
This particular money is getting offset by revenue. So if you look at the next sheet, there's $526,000 of revenue that we have received. And so those revenue sources are all of these various things that I kind of went over by category. So a piece of that is, let's not forget the $15,000 that fiscal services is bringing in.
Yeah.
But there's the drain revenue for increase in soil erosion permits. There's the $41,000 that is getting reimbursed to the general fund for the family support person. There's the $118,000 for increase in policing contract services for the sheriff's department.
Yes.
$91,000 for the jail, and then $239,000 for the MMRMA reimbursement or distribution.
So in that second page of that, which has the revenues, it has revenues of $54,441,000, which is less than the expenses.
So
How did that
that,
happen?
that's related to the 839,000. If you see that number right below it, that's the amount of vision toward contingency that we're bringing in from 2021.
Okay.
So in 2021, we had that amount of the same thing, basically from COVID and from the pre-pandemic level
Okay.
staffing.
I'm good now. Thanks. Any other questions? This requires a roll call. Oh, Commissioner Gross.
So, well, we've been reviewing this detail. If I remember correctly, there were several items that involved funds from 2021 into 2022. Does that mean we have to provide that information to our auditors? Because they've already done an audit on 2021, correct?
Right. So for some of those items, like for instance, the family support, that is an adjustment that we had to make. We have to make it in the current year because the books are closed for last year. So they will find that in the current year audit when they audit that next year. Mhm.
Sounds like we're ready for a roll call vote.
Commissioner Zajac,
Yes.
Commissioner Griffith is absent, Commissioner Gross,
Yes.
Commissioner Plank,
Yes.
Commissioner Smith,
Yes.
Commissioner Reader,
Yes.
Commissioner Nakagiri,
Yes.
Commissioner Helserman,
Yes.
Commissioner Drick,
Yes.
motion carries.
Thank you. Item 13, accounts payable reports. We have claims dated October 11th, 2022, and we have payables dated September 17th through September 30th, 2022. Looking for a motion to pay both.
So move Zajac.
Support Smith.
Motion by Commissioner Zajac, support by Commissioner Smith. Any comments? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. We paid the bills. Item 14 is call to public. This is a 2-minute call to the public. Anybody wishing to address the board has 2 minutes. Anybody in the room? Doesn't look like it. Anybody on Zoom with their hand raised? Doesn't look like it. I'm going to go ahead and close the call to public and look for a motion to adjourn.
So move, Helserman. Support, Gross.
Motion by Commissioner Helserman, support by Commissioner Gross. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? We're adjourned.